Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Today's Friday before Memorial Day. To the doctor and stuff like that. I do a couple of videos today, hopefully. The first one, I think, sort of the elephant in the room, even though it's not the end of the series. Talk about, the. I know the videos I've done on sports don't really find the same audience. I don't know. Anyways, I used to talk. I've written about sports in the blog too. It's not any different. So, the Timberwolves and the Oklahoma City and the Western Conference Final. I guess I could touch on the Knicks and the Pacers too a little bit, but so it's 2-0 Oklahoma City. Um, and yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by it, but it's still frustrating. The fact that Oklahoma City won both these games pretty convincingly. The rest, the fact that the Timberwolves didn't have 7 games series like the way that that Oklahoma City had a 7 game series with Denver. I mean, they were 68-14. I can't deny that. Um, I do kind of think their record is at least slightly based on them, kind of capitalize. They didn't lose to any bad teams. I don't think maybe I don't know one of those 14 losses they had. Whereas a lot of teams, including the Timberwolves, more than one, had some losses to teams that were definitely not as good as them, for various reasons, the back-to-backs, injuries, or whatever. So, um, going into the series, I think the Timberwolves would win. I mentioned in the previous video, I thought it was, you know, kind of a pick 'em. If I were having to pick who would win, I would have picked Oklahoma City. Not especially even considering their like I say the 7 game grueling war with the Nuggets they previously had. Um, the experience factor I thought might help to some degree. I mean, the series isn't over yet; it still could, and the coaching part, but last night in game 2, Oklahoma City just wasn't missing shots inside. Now, I mean, is that going to continue? Some of it is adjustments and dealing with, they have this quote unquote amazing defense, the number one defense in the NBA, and their defense is good. I'll give them. They're definitely better than the Lakers, and in a lot of ways, their defense is even better than Golden State. Even though Golden State's defense was a big part of the reason why they were good, they even made the play, and they were even though they were actually better than when the Wolves were bad. They were not as bad because they beat 3 out of the 4, beat the Wolves 3 out of 4. But I'm just more getting at is their defense. It's effective. I don't think it's historic though. Having watched the NBA, although I hit a low where I didn't watch the NBA for probably very very closely for about a decade, but I don't think their defense is like the 96 Bulls, the 92 Bulls, either of those two teams. The Pistons, these great defensive teams, those Spurs teams with Duncan, Ginobili, and Parker and the other guys they had. Robert Horry was on those Lakers teams. I thought at one point he was with the Spurs too. I don't think it is. I think if they played those teams, their defense wouldn't be nearly as effective. But part of it's how the NBA is called now. But it's sort of weird how the Shea Gilgeous-Alexander thing. Yeah, it's not necessarily defined how they've won the first 2 games and how they've played in the playoffs and won the playoffs and won this whole season. But it's kind of mentally been a sort of a weapon to the other team in some ways. The Wolves were trying to avoid following him, so you play defense differently. On the other side, and this is actually my bigger point of contention, is the way Oklahoma City does play defense. Their wings, their most of their perimeter defenders, they don't play the space. They seem to play the offensive player. They hand check, they grab and hand check, grab the jersey, and they slap. They frequently do that. And while if you get the ball, it's legal. And the thing is, I don't think too many other teams are coached to do that. So they're coached that way, and they're well coached. Although I still don't know if their coach, the name of their coach, Dagnall or whatever his name is this some amazing coach? But I'll give him credit. He's had been the number one seed 2 seasons in a row. But it's more of that. If they can get away with that, why aren't more teams? Why aren't the Wolves slapping more than they have? They did have, and that's the biggest thing. You look at the numbers, the first 2 games, this was last night. Oklahoma City only had 6 turnovers last night. That can't continue. The Wolves need to turn them over. They need to have twice as many turnovers if they're going to win any game in this series, probably. Um, and I don't know why. I mean, they protect the ball. They also protect the rim. And again, now compared to the last two teams they played, the Lakers and Golden State, it's kind of night and day. They have two big men, Holmgren and the other guys. I mean, used to be with the Knicks, who I guess the Wolves franchise has been interested in. But what's his name again? Anyway, they have more formidable protection, but part of it is they just kind of they make up ground. They shift, but they also are just kind of hovering on you, so they've made it difficult to score at the rim. They scored more at the rim last night, but some of it was sort of when they were trying to come back, which I only take with a grain of salt as being their full, 100%, intensive defensive intensity. But I I think that's part of it, the way they play, and they get away with it. Again, I don't think the way they play they would get away with it because they would be out physical in the night. Like I'm talking, it's like old man, get off my lawn, back in my day. But when I watched the NBA most intensively, like in the '90s, especially the '80s and the '90s, even in the early 2000s, when Garnett, they would not, they would not be, they're not imposing. That to me, their defense isn't as imposing as the numbers reflects. It's more almost psychological. It's psychological, and they part of it is they do play a lot of guys, but again, they have one guy who's Dort. I think is gonna. I guess he made the first team all defense, but I just don't look at their defense, their roster as being this defensive force. They don't have these all stars that are they don't have these guys that are known as extensive all stars. Maybe they'll become that way, and we're talking about some kind of dynasty. Although you could say like the Celtics, if they would have won this year, would be like a dynasty because they would have gotten to the final 3 out of 4 years. I don't think so. I think this is. I don't say it's a one-off, but I think let's say the Timberwolves don't win this series and then they play in the finals and they win. I think next year there's going to be a target on their back. They may not even have the same roster. That guy Caruso, he's a little fly. I mean, he's a punk. He's effective at what he does, but he's some of those Wiggins, these other guys they've got. They're smothering, but not necessarily smothering in a way I fully respect. But it works, and so I respect the fact that they're actually succeeding at that. But again, how did Denver manage to take him to 7 games? Probably because they were calling things a little different, and Denver pushed back. The Wolves need to push back. They did a little bit toward the end of the game in game 2, but the Wolves defense last year, and I would say at least portions of the playoffs this year, and if they were using Clark, they used Clark in game 1, can be very formidable and imposing, but not by hand checking and slapping constantly. To me, that's Bush. That is, if you're getting away with that, they're not calling the fouls. If it was even the other team was playing the same way. Some of it is coaching though. I think they need to go to a zone more. And I think they, if they get down, I think they need to extend it. They need to use Terrence Stamps Jr. especially. The Wolves were down by 24 points. I mentioned in the last video in February against this team. And now it was the second of a back-to-back, I guess, but no Randall, no Gobert, no Mike Conley, and Ant was out, and they came back, and largely it was led by that zone defense. Even Denver, I guess, played some zone against them, and that may have been partly why they were effective. But I mean, they've blown all these teams out. They have this like record about not only their gaudy records, like top 7 in the history of the NBA, though you're splitting hairs between. There's another 20 to 30 teams that won between 62 and 66 games or 67 games. So they're in that mix. And I think about those teams, even the Sonics team that made the finals, they won like 64 against the Bulls. I think that team is more imposing than this Oklahoma City Thunder team. Because you had Kemp, you had Gary Payton, an all-time perimeter defender. The glove, he got known for that. Who on this Oklahoma City team is going to be known for that? But they played at home. The first 2 games they played well. I just, they went. I just think it was similar to Dallas last year in that, the Wolves. I see the Wolves not playing up to their best game. Even the whole playoffs, really, they didn't play to their potential so far in this series. But I'll say when the Wolves they took the lead, I want to say some point early in the second half, and I almost posted something on Reddit saying, it's just hard to believe you have to exhaust that so much effort just to be able to like tie the game or take a lead. The same thing happened with Dallas last year in the Dallas games. The Wolves, the games were a little closer, other than like one game in Dallas, and I think game five. So three out of the five games, the one game the Wolves won, obviously, were closer. But I feel like they didn't have to. It wasn't as difficult, but they struggled to like sort of get the lead and hold the lead. I don't know. We'll see how they play in game three at home. But if they don't do something different or something doesn't affect Oklahoma City, they're shooting inside. They need to turn the ball over and not. They need to have Oklahoma City turn the ball over. And then they turned the ball over less in game two than game one. Um, and they need to basically be able to defend the interior. They can't let Chet Holmgren do this. And the thing is that they pointed out in game one when he was most effective offensively is when Gobert was off the floor. So I think Finch needs a. I think he did a little bit last night. He played Gobert more in the second half, but Holmgren at points was killing them. And while he's skilled, I look at him as like a poor man's version of Wemby. I mean, Wemby does everything he does and a lot better and is a lot more imposing defensively, but he has the same kind of he's not quite as tall as Wemby, but the same kind of body frame and style in some ways. Um, but what's the Hartenstein's the guy I was trying to think of. Hartenstein, I don't know, and part of it is it's not so much him against the Wolves, although his offense he hits those little floaters in the lane. Gobert and Randall need to and Reed, and I don't know. I mean, as much as a lot of the criticism of the Wolves in the first two games of the series and the whole playoffs for the most even is they haven't hit their threes. That's a factor certainly, but I actually think their defense needs to be more effective. You need to. It was somewhat effective in game one on Shea and that bullshit. Of course, he had 14 free throws and at least a third of those times he went to the free throw line. Maybe half of them were really pretty much not fouls. There were fouls that he initiated, but he was 10 of 27. He was like 10 of 20 or something like that last night. And the whole team was 50%. I think that actually went down. For most of the game, they were over 50%, especially because they didn't take that many threes. But I mean, they're a good team. They're arguably a borderline a great team, and their record kind of translate that to some and how much they won by. But I think it's just I don't look at them as this superior of a team to the Wolves or several other teams. But I mean, history may show more. Back in the '90s and '80s, I didn't think Jordan was amazing. He was obviously a great scorer. I didn't. His team wasn't great, and the team wasn't great. And the Pistons beat them twice. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't deny that, but I just don't. Their style of play, they're not that entertaining. I don't, you know, they have some athletes, but at this point, I don't find, I may not, I'm not sure if they win, and depending on who wins, if New York wins the other series, and that was just unbelievable comeback that Indiana had. I wasn't surprised by it though in some sense, so that sense it wasn't. Given the way that Indiana just torched the Wolves twice, especially that first the game that the Wolves should have won, they're missing all those guys. Neesmith and no relation to Michael Nesmith. A couple of the other guys they had, Indiana, and of course Halliburton. I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana wins, and then it's Indiana versus Oklahoma City. And I don't know. When the same thing happened last year with Dallas, it's like why can't we stop this team? Why can't we stop Luka and why can't the Wolves stop Luka and especially with the way their defense have been playing, have been so good. Um, Irving, Kyrie Irving, but Dallas, I mean Boston pretty much exposed it. And we Boston was very good. Their record was gaudy last year. They made the finals 2 years before that. But based on looking at their roster, especially when Porzingis was healthy, it wasn't that surprising because they in some ways you could say their roster is like a better version of Oklahoma City because they had this deep roster and they had all these perimeter guys that could hit the three and they were big but also quick and long. And that's why I concluded even though it would have been really interesting to see, the Wolves would have had a lot of problems with them last year. And if I don't know what happened this year. It's again the fault that to repeat is even more. They added a bullseye on their back. Um, but if the Oklahoma City team were to play Boston, last year's Boston especially, Boston, I think they would have handled them. But I know that Oklahoma City added some guys, Caruso and Hartenstein, a couple others, which made them better even this year than last year. But um, I just think that's the difference between an imposing team and a team that just kind of runs like a German train system where they're kind of better than the sum of their parts. Shea, yeah, I mean he's an all-star, but again, the way he plays and gets away with the thing about it, I was asking about on Reddit how many offensive fouls he's had in the playoffs, and he had 13 offensive fouls the whole year, I guess, which is just ridiculous the way he plays. He hooks and he clears out, and so many other guys. He's not the only one, but he frequently hooks and they don't call offensive fouls against him. They should. He should be getting one, at least probably two offensive fouls every game, and they don't call it. Now, again, Cat does the same thing. You could say Randall does it to some degree as well. But Shea has the ball more, because he's not their, I don't know if he's really their point guard, but he has the ball more, so he does it more. And I mean, yeah, I guess that would be the part of it is if he didn't play to see how good they would be. To see him play over a period of time, if he was in foul trouble. He did have 5 fouls last night, which is an improvement over the first game, but still BS. So I mean, I think the series is going to be a sweep. If I had to guess, no. I think there's enough sort of tension, anger, and pride for the Wolves that they're not going to be allowed. They're not allowed to get swept. But I think they'll either win game 3 or game 4. And I think also part of it is when you get a lead, you tend to relax. I know they've swept Memphis, but I think there's at least a reasonable chance the Wolves find a way to play the game closer or even get a lead in game 3. They'll win game 3, and then Oklahoma City may adjust. And the odds of the Wolves winning that game, even though they'll be feeling good about themselves, are not that high. But they have to win, and the Wolves have to win in Oklahoma City. I don't see it part of it. Even though I kind of felt I'm like flip flopping a little bit. The home court, for the most part, doesn't seem to matter as much as it once did in the NBA. Oklahoma City might be a little bit of an exception because you look at the Denver series. I don't think they won any games in Denver. So even game 6, which was close, I think went to overtime. But yeah, I mean, I'm in the other series. I'd like to see New York win. I'd like to see Cat win, and actually, it would be interesting to see um, Brunson play against Shea because he has a similar style. Though between the two of them, I don't think Brunson's quite as guilty of both the floppy and the foul. But I mean, Brunson is an excellent shot maker, and he's better at sort of his intentions to score seem more genuine, even though he does take a lot of contact and try to look for contact. And Bridges, some of the look at New York's defense and even the Tibbs thing, and then I appreciate, but what I think they could beat Oklahoma City. No, I mean, and I pick Indiana at this point. Indiana, it's interesting that they have a similar kind of. They're a little bit like Oklahoma City, but I even look at them a little bit better. I look at them in terms of their style of play, and they actually go in and out more. Whereas part of it's watching the Wolves, watching the 3-point ball, whether that's better for worse. It's so much a part of the game. And Oklahoma City doesn't rely. They're not that great of a 3-point shooting team. Even they don't rely on it the way many teams, including the Celtics and the Wolves, do. Maybe that's for the better that they're more old school in that sense, but I don't know. I just I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma City beat either of those teams, but I wouldn't be surprised if Indiana were to find a way to beat them. Maybe a little bit like last year, the Celtics also probably looked at some of the tape of the Wolves game. They figured out how to play Dallas. Indiana's and Carlisle's a really good coach too. I mean, look what he did. They beat Cleveland. See, that was my first choice. If Cleveland would have been healthy, to see Cleveland play Oklahoma City, because they're better. Again, I respect their stars a little bit better than the guys in Oklahoma City. Maybe it's biased because I'm a Wolves fan, but I don't know. But I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But I never made. I think I filmed it. Maybe I didn't. The Minnesota sports history, history of heartbreak thing. I should do that because the Wolves lose this series again. Another, semifinal in the league for Minnesota sports team that they fall short. And what's going to happen in the offseason, of course. Nas Reed and Randall back. And probably not both of them. So anyway, that's my take on the first two games in the series. Western Conference Finals, Timberwolves and Oklahoma City Thunder. But thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.